So this is going to be super different from everything you've seen so far. Oh, that looks like the wrong title slide. Is there another one in there, perchance? Trust me, it'll be worth it. Yeah, so while they're loading that up, if they get the one, basically today, I'm going to talk to you about kind of like a community building effort. Oh, look, that's it. Cool, awesome. It also looks like some points aren't showing up. That's not a problem, guys. Keep it positive. All right, so today I'm going to talk to you about an effort that we're trying to get started between Kim Calder's, John Armstead, and I, where we're essentially trying to bring together the data that all the TLS, I guess all the TLS people we can find have collected thus far in a metadata format. So the idea is like figure out what we have so we can potentially get to larger scale ecological questions that people outside of just the remote sensing community would be interested in asking. So, I just want to start by showing a couple images of the range of different crown architectures that we can find on Earth. So, depending on the ecosystem you go to, you see this huge array of different forms of tree crowns, whether it's a fractal-like pattern in the canopy, to a baobab tree, which is just bizarre, or this Montezuma cypress, which has a massive trunk. What is the DBH of that? I don't know. To the tallest tree on Earth that we know of. We see this huge array of different crown architectures, and the idea is to try to characterize all these different architectures in a way that's quantitative and consistent, and systematic, so we can ask interesting ecological questions about those trees. So, with that in mind, there's some recent work that suggested we create this plant structural economic spectrum. Really cool paper. And the idea is like, we can start characterizing these different factors that describe the architecture, the shape of the tree crown, like the aspect ratio, the crown density, or the vertical profile of that tree crown, and use it to start to more quantitatively describe what's going on in a single tree structure. And the idea is to potentially do this across a much larger scale. And we can do this with TLS. This is something that, with these quantitative structure models that have been in the works for many, many years now, we're potentially able to get to the stage of being able to quantify and characterize crown architecture in a really unique way. And next. Yay. Okay, so we're bringing together a global data set that has a bunch of points that you can't see. But I promise they're there. The idea is that we want to kind of get community involvement for this, because what we're essentially trying to do is bring together the metadata of everything that our community has collected over the 15 years that we've really actively been trying to collect terrestrial LiDAR data, and try to characterize it in a very systematic way so other people outside of our field can actually do something with it and ask the questions that we're not necessarily addressing, and hopefully facilitate interesting collaborations in the future. So, the way that this is working, let's see if this works. Yes! Okay, so what we put together were a couple means for you to potentially submit your metadata. One of them is a Google form, which is admittedly a very inefficient way to submit your metadata, especially if you have a ton of terrestrial LiDAR that you've already collected. So with that in mind, we have a standardized spreadsheet format that you can basically get from us and just fill in your data with essentially whatever you've collected thus far. From that, we've brought together, see, I told you we have plots. We brought together all these different plots from the three of us, just John Armstrong, Kim Cullers, and I. And as of now, we have over 1,000 TLS acquisitions plots that we've collected in all these different environments. And the idea is to open this up to everyone so that we can now know exactly what everyone has. Not actually get your data, but the metadata, just so we know what's out there. So John Armstrong is part of the JEDI science team, and he's put together kind of a TLS version of this navigable map that we can look at the metadata that we have with TLS. So you can zoom in, you can see places where this, for example, is this pretty long time series that we collected in 2018. It's when you scan a single location over and over again, it comes out with this pretty sweet spiral pattern. But you can select each one of these individual TLS acquisitions and get a suite of information that can help you understand exactly what is out there and what you can potentially do with it. So that way you can basically add your data to the map so others know what's out there. Now that site was located here in Virginia, where we have this dense seasonal time series. We're interested in phenology. These are single scan data. We also have another site in Virginia where we've done some work looking at calibration and validation for sensors like JEDI and the biomass mission, as well as NISAR. We've also done some work with allometric equations, developing non-destructive allometric equations with terrestrial LiDAR at this other Virginia site. We also have information from a ton of other sites in the US, especially like Harvard Forest, where we have these infected stands of hemlock with woolly adelgid. We also have an old growth, very old stand that's never been cut of hemlocks that's in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. That was just this last summer. It was a good time. Also, Blackcash wetlands, which are a very unique system. It's really dominated by the hydrology of individual sites. We did some work looking at microtopography of the site as well. You can check that paper out. And the Smoky Mountains, where we have some of the tallest canopies on the east coast of the United States, and it's considered to be one of the more complex and layered forests in the US. Also, Costa Rica, where we basically have dense tropical forest along with some interesting giant trees. This tree was actually a bat cave. I scanned inside it. It was super cool. And then with some of the contributions from Kim, this was from his PhD work in Victoria, Australia, where the infamous, is it infamous? No. This great paper that we all cite over and over again is based, as well as the huge array of different locations from Turn that's in our network as well. And yeah, there we go. Kim has also contributed a huge 6-hectare study site of Wytham Woods in the United Kingdom. And at this site, he segmented lots and lots of trees, around 1,000 trees, where they've also been modeled QSMs. And so this is the type of thing that is going to be super valuable in us improving allometric equations moving forward. We also have a ton of scan data from all sorts of tropical locations. These are in the database now: Indonesia, Peru, Guyana. And you should check those papers out. Those are especially nice. And also, a couple of years ago, I had the pleasure, it was pretty intense, to visit the tallest mangrove forest on Earth in Gabon. And so we have a bunch of scan data from there as well. We're talking about mangrove forests that are on the order of 63 meters tall. It's really absurd So just because I don't think a lot of people have seen the tallest mangrove forest on Earth with 3D data, this is an example of that. There I am sitting in pain. But basically what you can see is that the form of this stand of trees is unlike any other mangrove stand you might have visited. These are absurd, enormous trees, and capturing the structural variability that exists in that stand is really important for us to really hone in something like the allometric relationships in this forest. Cool. So if you can see the plots, you would notice that we already have hundreds of plots. This feels very ironic. But I think the idea being, with community support, I think if we all kind of work together and just submit this really simple information, we could easily fill in this database and have thousands of plots and really start to build this up to something that we can all use as a community. So I wanted to, oh cool, there are data points. I don't know why they're that shaped, that's super weird. But one of the first things I wanted to do was just show you kind of the range of climates that we're actually covering with this current data set. So we look at median annual temperature and annual precipitation. We can see that we're actually covering a pretty wide array of climates in different ecosystems, which I think is super interesting that just the three of us piling in what we had in our hands filled out this much of this climate range. So I think with more contributions, it could get even more interesting. So in terms of the types of things that we can do with that, you can start to look at the volumetric, allometric relationships that exist across totally different ecosystems, because with terrestrial lidar, what we're getting are these volumetric measurements. And from that, we can start to say, okay, how does something like the precipitation or the temperature actually impact the allometric relationship? And use that to really improve allometric equations going forward. And that's the kind of thing that can really help us understand what is actually driving tree architecture in the first place. And we can also get really crazy and try to look at something, say, like the vertical distribution of wood allocation with respect to individual species across systems that span the whole Earth. So this is just not meant to be something for us to interpret, but more to like use as a thought experiment. What can we learn from the vertical distribution of volume from all these different individual tree species that could maybe improve allometric equations going forward, or forest models, or whatever you're interested in. And this also is really critical and ties directly into what the JEDI mission is trying to do. So for JEDI, it's really important that we have the best possible calibration and validation data set that's available. For terrestrial lidar, that's becoming basically the standard. So can we improve ground-based allometric equations within JEDI footprints globally? Well, we would need a whole lot of different plots to do that with a whole lot of different systems. And that's the kind of thing that is a community effort. So this database would basically play the role of knowing where the data actually is and who to contact to potentially work with it. And cool. So, in summary, I think that this global data set of metadata, really the role that it's going to play potentially with your involvement would be to really improve and foster international collaboration, really enable these larger scale studies to understand the drivers of individual tree architecture in lots of different ecosystems, help update these allometric equations that we really mean that every bit of the global estimate of carbon storage relies on. And related to that is really improving calibration and validation of all of these Earth observation sensors, whether it's JEDI, NISAR, biomass, you name it. They're all relying on plot level data to be as good as possible. And so us contributing to that, I think, in any way possible, would be really powerful. So, feel free to contribute. And with that, I'll just say thank you. And if you're interested in this, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll send you all the info you need to submit some metadata. And that's it.